Welcome, everybody. We will be starting in 2 minutes. So this is your warning to go to the bathroom and grab a cold beverage and buckle up. Jeff, we have our first panel question. What product do you use on your hair? From Dr. Latuya.
Yeah, some LA looks really gives the shine.
So my name is Judd Blakesley. I am the Senior Lending Officer with Mountain West Small Business Finance. So I would work and support the loan officers with our loan production. And our presenter today is Jeff Vanchiere. Many of you know Jeff has been a loan officer in our Southern Utah market for years. And he's taken on a role this last year where he oversees the processing portion of our origination staff. So he works with and supports our underwriters and loan specialists in streamlining our process, in training, and working with SBA and our staff on proper procedures and keeping quick turn times. Before we turn over to Jeff, I wanted to share a few SBA updates. The first one, the SBA, many of you have seen, there's been changes over the past couple weeks with staff reductions, and we've kind of been waiting to see that impact as it's played out. And with any staff reductions, our turn times on loans have actually remained pretty constant. And they're about 3 to 5 days for the SBA to receive a loan package, review, process, ask questions, or approve. And so that's held. SBA still seeing really good turn times, and that's been a positive for us. One SOP change has been ownership on projects. Historically, you could have 51% U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident, and 49% could be foreign owner. The SBA has made a change that all projects have to be 100% U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident owned, and there's no exceptions there. So now what we're seeing as part of the paperwork with that, each owner has to sign a U.S. citizenship authorization certification, and that's where when we submit a loan, we confirm birthdays, social security numbers, and have each person certify they're a citizen with each project. So that 100% is heavily enforced and required on all projects. With that, we'll turn it over to Jeff. And the purpose for the environmental update is the SBA, with these staff reductions, they've made changes to the environmental process. So we want everyone to be aware of what's required. Historically, there have been 3 approvals that come with every project: the authorization, which is now called the terms and conditions, an appraisal approval, and an environmental approval. And so now you'll see with Jeff's presentation how that environmental process is overseen and what type of approval you'll be receiving from Mountain West. Okay, take it away, Jeff.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Judd, and thank you all for tuning in. I know that these one-way kind of Zoom presentations can get a little dry, so my goal today is to keep it short and sweet, to hit the highlights and to send you on your way. So as you are probably aware, a couple of weeks ago, the SBA updated their procedure for reviewing and approving environmentals. It's important to note they did not update their policy. In other words, the type of environmental that's required based on the property type has not changed. The change here is just the review and approval process. So like I said, I really just want to hit the highlights today, keep it short, and leave you with a couple of key takeaways. So with that said, let's get into it. Okay, so here's the actual procedural notice. Well, the first page of it is a 5-page notice. We'll avoid getting into the weeds today, but it's notice number 50086605. And you'll note that it's effective March 20th, 2025. So it's actually been in play for a couple of weeks. And we've been working on fine tuning our internal process to match the changes. So we will zoom in on a couple of paragraphs here and go over those and talk about what they mean. Okay, so the big one, and this is where I want to spend most of our time, is how to handle properties with no contamination. So this would be, either a risk assessment, an RSRA report, or a phase one that comes back with as low risk and no further investigation recommended. And the reason that I want to spend most of our time here is hopefully these are the types of reports that we're going to see most often. We would refer to them as clean reports or low risk reports. So from the SBA policy notice, properties with no contamination. If an environmental investigation report concludes that a property has no contamination, it is the SBA lender's responsibility. In other words, it's our responsibility in the context of a 504. It's the CDC's responsibility to certify an E-Tran that the property complies with all SBA environmental requirements in the SOP and in this notice. And the SBA lender, or in other words, the CDC must maintain the environmental investigation reports in the SBA lender's loan file. So essentially what this means is that on clean environmental reports, we won't be forwarding those on to the SBA to review and approve. We will review those in-house and we will self-certify that the report meets the SBA standards. We view this as a good change because it'll take a couple of days. In times past, we would get the report, we would review it, and then we would need to send that on to the SBA for them to review and approve. And that always took a couple of days. So this new process allows us to sign off on the reports and save a couple of days in the overall process. So we definitely view this as a good thing. So here's what that will look like for you. And one of the key takeaways is on this slide here. So step one is still, we want to order the appropriate level of environmental. So nothing changes there. If the property that we're lending on, if it's a gas station or if it was a gas station, if it's a metal manufacturer, if it's a dry cleaner or ever has been, all that stuff still remains in play. We'd still have to order a phase one in those cases. So really no change there. We're going to order the appropriate level of environmental based off of the property type. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. Now, once the report comes back, and assuming that it's clean, in other words, it's a property with no contamination, Mountain West will sign a certification. We will upload that certification to SBA, and then we'll retain the actual environmental reports in our file. It's important to note at this point, there won't be any further review of the reports from the SBA. We just upload them and that's it. And then the key takeaway is this: on clean environmentals, on properties with no contamination, Mountain West will send you, the participating lender, an environmental approval letter. Okay, so in the past, that has come from SBA and we have forwarded that on to you. But moving forward, you'll receive an environmental approval letter from Mountain West on clean properties. So I want to show you what that will look like. So we'll zoom in on the main paragraph on the next slide, but this is what the letter will look like. I want to point out a couple of things. You'll notice it's on Mountain West letterhead. It'll be dated. It'll be addressed to the bank or the credit union or the lender that we're working with, and to the actual individual banker that we're working with. It'll reference the SBA loan name, the SBA loan number, and the project address. And then the other thing I wanted to point out here is it will have two signatures from Mountain West. The loan officer who's actually working the project will sign it, and then it'll have a signature from a manager as well. as we were kind of building our internal process for what this would look like, we thought it would be wise to have two sets of eyes on every report, just to make sure that we're giving it a thorough review. So your approval letter should have two signatures, and the manager's signature will come from either myself, Judd, Spencer, or Danny. And then, of course, the signature from the loan officer. So this is as good as gold as far as environmental approvals go. If you get this letter from us, you should not be expecting anything further from the SBA. Okay, now let's zoom in on this main paragraph here. Essentially what it'll do, it'll reference the type of report that was ordered. So it'll say the phase 1 assessment or the RSRA or whatever level of report that was ordered. It will reference the date, and it will say it shows no recognized environmental conditions associated with the property. The report was prepared by, so we'll list the environmental company that prepared the report. And then the key statement here is Mountain West Small Business Finance certifies the environmental report is in compliance with SOP and meets current SBA environmental requirements. So again, this is what it'll look like for properties with no contamination. Okay, so that's the key takeaway. Letter will come from us, not from SBA. Now, let's jump into, this is further on in the policy notice that was released. This is properties with contamination. So the scenario might be that you order the RSRA or the phase 1 or whatever level it is, and it comes back with an issue or a recommendation or something that needs to be addressed. This process will look a little bit different. This top paragraph here essentially says that we can still, attempt to lend on the property, but we have to follow all the guidelines outlined in the SOP. And then I've highlighted this non-delegated procedures because 95% of the loans we do, maybe 99% of the loans we do are non-delegated. In other words, we're sending everything into the SBA. We won't take the time to read this paragraph, but what it's saying is that when there's a property with contamination, we will upload the reports and we will make our case. We'll list mitigating factors, and we will send that to the SBA district office to be reviewed. Once the district office has had a chance to review it, they will respond with either an approval or a request for more information. Oh, weird. How'd that get in there?
What?
I'll have to check with my PowerPoint people. So here is the process for properties with contamination. The report and the mitigating explanation will be sent to SBA district office for review, and that's something we'll prepare with your help, of course. The SBA district office will review and respond with either an approval or a request for additional information. And it's important to note here, there'll probably be some back and forth, right? We'll send in our report and our argument to the SBA district office. In some cases, they'll probably sign off on it. In other cases, they'll want more information or additional steps taken. And that's where your loan officer will work directly with you to resolve that. Ultimately, here's the difference in the process. Ultimately, once approved, the SBA will issue an approval. And that'll likely be in the form of an email from the SBA district office. And Mountain West will then forward a copy of the approval letter to the participating third-party lender. So the key difference being on clean properties, the approval letter will come from Mountain West. On properties with contamination or further action that needs to be taken, the approval letter will come from the SBA district office. Okay, now outside of the policy notice, just a couple of suggestions, a couple of best practices when it comes to environmentals, things to do early in the process. And the reason I emphasize early in the process, I'm sure we've all been in that situation where a settlement deadline is looming. the SBA's already approved the loan, they've already approved the appraisal, and the environmental just kind of got put to the side or ignored and was done late in the process. And so now we're anxiously awaiting the SBA to review the environmental and issue an approval so that you can go ahead and close on your construction loan. So to avoid that stress, we recommend that we address the environmental early in the process. And we're going to train our loan officers and our support staff to do that as well. But early in the process, you should determine who should order the environmental. So in my 10 years as a loan officer, most of the time we did that, or I did that. But I understand that there are some banks and credit unions out there that either because of policy or preference, you want to order the report, which is fine. That's totally fine. In such cases, we're happy to provide recommendations on who you should order the report from. Because we kind of have a wide array of projects and we have a pretty good feel for the different environmental companies out there, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. You know, some environmental companies are more apt to kind of find problems and elevate to the next level, maybe as a sales tactic. I don't know. Some environmental companies tend to put kind of throwaway statements in that end up causing problems with the SBA. So they might say the property, there's no recognized environmental conditions. However, the lender may want to consider moving the tires in the back of the property. And what they think is a throwaway statement, the SBA will hang on to that and say, well, did you move the tires in the back of the property? So we've come to kind of learn which companies to use in certain situations. So again, we're happy to take the lead and to order the environmental. If your bank requires that you order it, or it's your preference that you order it, that's fine as well. We're happy to give recommendations on which environmental companies to use. Okay, so determine who should order the environmental. And then again, early on in the process, determine what type of environmental the property requires. It's never fun to order a questionnaire and an RSRA only to find out that the type of property in the NAICS code requires a phase 1. If you're unsure, you can consult with your Mountain West loan officer and they can get you pointed in the right direction as to which type of environmental needs to be ordered. I'd also recommend, again, early in the process, if a questionnaire is required, get it into the hands of the property owner as soon as possible. And I stress property owner. So these notes here, the questionnaire must be completed by the current property owner. So if you've got a situation where your buyer, your borrower does not own the property yet, they aren't the ones that should be filling out the questionnaire. It needs to be completed by the current property owner. And then if it's a bank questionnaire, so if it's a questionnaire from your institution, it must have the following disclosure, and I'll pull that up here in a minute. But you know, oftentimes we do get a questionnaire that's filled out from the bank or from the credit union that we're working with, and we can't use it because it doesn't have the proper disclosure on it. So here's what that disclosure looks like. Somewhere on there, it's got to have this language about intentionally falsifying, concealing any material fact, that basically that they're not lying and that it could result in penalties if they are. So if your form at your institution has a disclosure like this, we should be okay. If it does not, ultimately we'll have to get our own form filled out and signed in addition to yours. So key takeaways. So just to kind of wrap it up, identify what type of environmental report is needed and communicate with your Mountain West Small Business Finance loan officer to determine who will order the environmental. Best to do this as early as possible in the process. Okay. Number 2, environmental reports with no contamination will be reviewed and self-certified by Mountain West Small Business Finance, and you will receive an environmental approval letter from Mountain West. Environmental reports with contamination will require additional steps, including a review and a determination from the SBA district office. And your Mountain West loan officer will work with you in these cases to kind of guide you through that. Okay, with that said, we'll open it up to questions. I don't know if you can type questions in or what the format is. But if you do have questions, go ahead and send them on in. And
Could the SBA lend on a landfill?
I don't know, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, that environmental report has to say there's no risk and no further recommendations. I did get one approved on what was a sewage retention pond in the 80s. And we, after some back and forth, were ultimately able to get it approved.
Yeah, any cleanup, I mean, so Superfund sites, all that has to have. So I think if there was a landfill, it'd have to be recognized, limited use on the property. You know, former Geneva sites had restrictions on what could, you can't have anything planted there, other things. So I think anything landfill wise, unless they're using it for untapped resources, then it cannot be spec searching
Yeah.
for old resources. But we'll dig into that and see what SBA would require on a landfill. Already any further question? Thanks, Jeff. That was great.
Okay.
Any question anyone has, you can reach out to your loan officers, shoot them a note. Anything we don't know, we check with SBA, and appreciate their insight and opportunity working with them. So thanks for attending. We appreciate it.
Thank you.